Here, try this again. Hey kids, welcome back to Uncle Fezzi's Mad Lab. What's Uncle Fezzi up to now? Well, my 10-part video series on building my speakers kind of inspired me to, hey, you know what, maybe I should make some more videos again. Now, I understand that that series of videos was ludicrously long, and you really had to be a dedicated follower to watch that. Thank you. So, what's the next video that I'm doing, or what's the next project on my agenda? Well, one of the things that I sell is marbles. I sell a lot of marbles. Full disclosure, this is actually not my marble. This is one that my partner made, and it just happened to be handy. Now, one of the things with marbles is they roll around and they wander away, and you know, nobody actually plays marbles with my marbles. If you do, good. If you don't, well, you know, what it is, what it is. Now, I can't just sell a marble. No matter how inexpensive I make the marble, I can't just like give somebody a marble and that's that. I mean, I can, but one of my hooks is if you buy a marble, you get a free marble holder. Well, years ago, I had made a whole bunch of marble holders. Well, I'm out. Now, those marble holders that I'd made years ago were, for the sake of argument, we're going to say prototypes. So after a considerable amount of market research, I figured out that, quite frankly, nobody really gives a crap what the marble holder looks like as long as it holds the marble. Okay? Well, that's not holding the marble. The other thing, and it's one of my mantras, is you got to get jiggy with it. And if you're going to make more than one of anything, you need to build jigs to do it with. At the very minimum. And that jig could be something as simple as just a stop block for cutting things, or, as in this case, it's going to be a little bit more technical. Now, I also went through multiple different ways of how can I get a nice well, for the sake of argument, or a cut in the marble holder to hold the marble in place. Well, I found the best way for me to do that is to use a 3/4 inch core box bit. Now, I tried to do it in multiple different tools in multiple different techniques, and the truth of the matter is the only way it works is with a high-speed router. As a matter of fact, the only way it works really reliably is with a high-speed plunge router, because I use all kinds of different wood to do it with. I make these marble holders out of scrap. Literally, I just make them out whatever scrap I have laying around that's the right width and somewhat thickness, but mostly the right width. I make them, right? So if I have whatever scrap I have laying around that's at minimum of 2 inches wide, I rip it on the I'm ripping them on the table saw real quick, and then cutting them, flipping them around and cutting them so that I get as close to 2 inches as humanly possible. Let me rephrase that: as close as 2 inches as feasibly possible. Now, for a while, I was eyeballing them, and quite frankly, eyeballing them ain't working anymore. My eyeballs ain't that good. So I'm building a jig. Now, in the spirit of television, I already basically laid this all out, and I did the vast majority of my cuts. And here's where we're at. So just as a quick recap, what I did was I found center on one of these. This is actually upside down. That's the top. This is actually the bottom. So I found center on this piece of 3/4 inch MDF. I'm using 3/4 inch MDF for a couple reasons. One is it's what I had laying around. And two, it's what I had laying around. I make a lot of jigs out of whatever I have laying around. This just so happens to be 3/4 inch MDF. Now, I'm fairly sure I could have done this about 25 different ways and got the exact same result, but this is where I'm at right now. So there's a couple things with this jig. Oh, the other thing is weight. 3/4 inch MDF is pretty heavy. And I like my jigs, especially for ones that I'm going to be using with a router, I like those jigs to be heavy, and I need to be able to clamp them to this bench or in a vise or wherever I decide I'm going to do these. 3/4 inch MDF gives you a lot of meat to screw to, even though MDF doesn't really like screws. So here we are. Now I already set this one in place because this one is the fucky side. I squared this piece of wood up. This piece is like, I forget what size it is, but it was for another project that I messed up. And I've already cut all my wood. I've already laid out the base of the jig. Getting jiggy with it. So we're gonna go from there. Now I have, like I said, there's multiple different ways I could have done this. There's multiple different ways I could have done this, but really, I need to be able to plop this router down in a repeatable fashion quickly. The only way I can give away these marble holders is to make them so ridiculously fast and easy to make that they require seconds of work if I do them in a batch, right? So if I do, I don't know how many of these I have, but if I do a whole shit ton of these, I have to be able to make them in a production kind of way. It's the same way I do my Christmas ornaments. So I was gonna glue this and screw this, or glue this and pin this together, but I think what I'm gonna do here is just pin it in case I have to take this back apart. It's a lot easier to deal with if you have only a couple pins that you have to take out. That, and it's just a jig. It doesn't need to be long lasting. If I need to adjust it, you can pull these apart. You can pull the brads apart. I'm not going to put a billion brads in this thing. I'm going to put a couple to hold it. And then if it really works nicely, I might put a couple screws in it, but I don't even think I'm going to do that just yet. So I'll whip out my brad nailer here, and I'm going to clamp this down because for whatever reason, I found that if you don't clamp stuff down before you nail it, brad nail it, you can, it will move around on you, the voice of experience. So I actually already cut all these, and I've already, almost lost my ashtray. I've already cut all these and numbered them so I can just plop them right down here for the sake of the video. These are as square and smooth and nice as I could make them. MDF, I think it's my blade. I think it's my saw blade, but I get a lot of burrs when I cut MDF. And then this is loose. It's loose intentionally for a couple reasons. One is so I can get it out. I've actually made jigs in the past where I made the jig so tight that I couldn't get the wood out. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drill a hole in the bottom of this thing, but not right this second. So, actually, you know what? I might do that first. It's not a bad idea to drill a hole in the bottom of your jig so you can push this out. And I think that's what I'm going to do. Nah, I'll leave it in. I'll drill the hole later. Because I kind of want to drill the hole from this side. So we'll do it that way. You also notice that I marked the outline of my router base plate. I only have, well, I have two plunge routers, but this is my smaller plunge router, and I like this router better. My other router is kind of unwieldy, so I'm not a huge fan of that thing. So I'll put my test piece back in. So we're good that way. We're good that way, and we're pretty good this way. Making the pieces all identical is kind of important. So that's the other reason I do them in batches. If I have the saw set up, I will run as much wood through the saw as I can at one time to get it the way I want it. You know, they have a nice little 45 on them, and it sets the marble up pretty decent height-wise. This is a small marble. Mine are actually considerably larger. I do 1.25 inch, 1.5 inch marbles for the most part. I do smaller ones, but it's okay. Remember, these marble holders are free. So we're just going to take a couple pins here. Pro tip: air hose so you can reliably use the tool. And the other is you want to absolutely positively make sure that your pins are not over length, because you don't want to pin your jig to the table. I may know a guy that did that. So we're just going to put a couple pins in. Now my pins are outside of except for this one. Damn it. Okay. Just a quick check. Yeah, these are only inch and maybe 1.5 inches. I think these pins are about 1.5 inches. Now we can pop this apart here, and we have our jig. I could leave it like this, but I don't want to leave it like this. So the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to take it over to my table saw, and I'm going to rip this down. I'm going to rip this down. I'll save you that part. Oakley dokley, I ran it through the table saw, and what I did here was I cut it. I cut this side flush because my game plan is to take another piece of MDF, slap it up on the side here, and have 3 sides open, or 3 sides blocked in. So when I go to put the router in, I could just slide the router in and then plunge it. And this particular one, so now that I've set it all up and I've looked at it, even with a little bit of play in the part here, I'm off my center, so I need to take another rip off of this, but I'm going to cut this piece first. So I trimmed off this edge a 32nd at a time until I moved the stop all the way in to a point where it's now direct dead center line with the part. And then the other thing I'm doing here is I'm checking to make sure that this is square to this. I'm doing my damnedest to try to get this square, and part of that reason, well, the reason to make sure that this stuff is as perfectly straight and square as you can, is you don't want to screw it up, because this is your jig, and then everything, or your pattern, and everything that you do from this pattern off of this pattern is going to be screwed up if you screw it up. So next step, so you can kind of see here that when I set it's not going to show up on camera, and I'm not moving the camera. When I set the router in place here and trace the base, it's out of square to this piece by about a 32nd, if not a full 16th, but it still keeps us in line there. And as I said, this is the pattern that I will be using forever on these, and I want them to be, or well, for as long as I'm making them, because this is going to be, you know, these are now the marble holders. So I'm going to be using this jig enough, well, to justify a jig, but also enough that if it's crooked, if it's not straight, if it's out of whack, or if it's wonky, then I got a problem. So fairly sure that that's good. Now I'm going to take and pin, I'm going to pin this together. Ah, bastard. And again, I want to make sure that I'm nice and flush, which I'm not here. Even though I am going to cut this end, I want it, when I run it up against the when I run it up against the fence, actually this side's not going to get run against the, I'll probably cut this on my radial arm saw. So in the next cut, well, I got to put these pins in. The other thing is this table and this mat are as dead level and flat as I can make them. I really like this nailer. It's way nicer than the Harbor Freight one. Obviously, it's nicer than Harbor Freight. Now let's pop this apart, make sure that my pins are nice. Yep, pins are nice. And then I'm going to just check for square again, because this is a vital cut here. So I want to check to make sure that that's nice and square. That's nice and square. That's relatively nice and square. Let's lengthen this down a little bit. Truth be told, that I paid a lot of money for this speed square, but it's a little finicky. Yep, we're nice and square all the way across. Okay, back over to the radial arm saw. This bears a little bit of notation here. I just put this thing on my radial arm saw and I noticed that it wasn't squaring up. I wanted to use this side here as my up against the fence. Well, why isn't it squaring up? Well, it's not squaring up because there's a burr on here. So I just have this block of wood with some sandpaper on it. I'm just going to knock the burr off and just kind of relieve it so it fits in nice. I'm going to do this side too. It doesn't need a lot. It's literally deburring. It looks like the bottom's a little funky too. And we're gonna, but that's nice and flat. I got rid of that burr there. Okie dokie, Smokey. I just did my first. So I cut this flat, and then I did my test fit on this, and bring it down, and it's where it needs to be. So I'm going to nail this end in, and then I'm going to cut the. I'm going to nail this end in here because I like it. It fits. The router fits in really nice, and then I'm going to cut it for this length or this width here. But that one's getting nailed in, and it's going together pretty much exactly the way I wanted it to. The other funny thing is, and I knew this was going to happen, I can't get my plug out now because it got tight in there. And I want it tight, so I'm not worried about that, because eventually I'll just drill a hole in it. I'll put a screw in this thing and pull it out. What I'm doing here is checking that, make sure that this piece is absolutely square. We're as square as I can ever make anything. The reason is I'm using it as a template, as a guide here. Now I could just nail this down now that this is square against here. And then I want to check to make sure that the router actually will slide in and out. I may actually do that. I may just leave this. The router doesn't need to slide. I want it to slide. You know what? I may just do that. Yeah, I might just do it that way. I might just nail it down through here and call it a day. What I was going to do was trim. I was going to cut this way and then do it like this, but I actually think I'm going to do it like that. I like this piece. It overhangs. It's nice and square. I'm going to check for the second time. Interestingly enough here, the router base plate is offset on the router, so it's about 32nd of an inch, give or take, difference between this side and this side. So if I flip the router around, it won't be right. So I need to make sure that every time I use this jig, that the on-off switch is facing me, which is fine. That's not very hard to remember, and I'm the only one that's ever going to use this thing anyway. So that's going to be that. I'm going to take this square, check to make sure that's square. Yeah, that's square. I'm just going to nail this down. Bang, bang. I'm not going to bother. I will trim this little lip off, but I'm not going to trim. I'm not going to do it this way. In case I need to, for the sake of argument, let's say I want to use a different router, this base doesn't work out, what have you, I can always just pop this thing off. I'm only going to put like 3 brads in it. I'll do it right now. I don't like to rebuild jigs if I don't have to. Now another really important part about jigs and jig work, getting jiggy with it, is having a reliable way to fix your fixture into something. And in this particular case, I have 2 different vices that I use in my shop here to do things with. One is right behind me over here. Actually, I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I have like 5 or 6 vices that I use for different things. One of them's actually out of commission right now, but that doesn't matter. I actually, when I'm running the router, oftentimes I will do it over here because I can pull the vacuum hose off of my radial arm saw and just stick it right next to wherever it is I'm running the router, and it sucks the cheese up. So what I did here was, this actually a scrap piece. This isn't the piece I'm going to use. So I went over to this vise here, which is the, that vise has the closest tolerances and the closest tolerances for this type of stuff. So I marked a line, I stuck this into the vise, and I marked a line on it. So this is and it's the red line. It can't go I don't want it to go any further down than that, because it won't sit flat on top of the vise anymore, it'll wobble. So this is my vise line. Then after I chose my vise line, I went around and I marked this side. So this is my overall width side. Now I'm going to go back over to the table saw, and I have another piece of MDF. I'm not going to use this one. Actually, I probably could. You know what? I think I will. It doesn't need to be much longer than that. So actually, I think I will use this piece of MDF. Now, conveniently enough, and my clamp is right. Nah, you bastard. My the vise that I'm going to be using this jig in is right here. So, well, the vise that I plan on using this jig in for the most part is right here. So, I can just clamp it right into place, right where I'm going to use it, which is plenty for what I'm doing, and it's not going anywhere, hopefully. And we're just going to pin it take that clamp off, make sure it's not going to move around too much. And then the next thing I'm going to do is drill this hole in here. Just like that. This is probably how I'm going to actually use this thing. Let's pick a big ass drill bit. Something I can stick my finger in. It's the biggest drill bit I have. It's 1/2 inch that I think will fit in this drill. Yep. I should use a spade bit for this. Interesting. Oh, I am going to use a spade bit. I'm going to use a bigger spade bit. Because I want to be able to stick my finger in this thing. When I'm making these, I want to be able to pop them in and pop them out as fast as I can. My finger's about 11/16. My pinky's definitely 11/16. This drill bit's seen way better days. We're not going to use that one. This 5/8 one looks pretty good. I'm going to use my impact gun because these spade bits are a pain in the ass. Make sure I'm not going to drill through my table. Drilling through MDF can be a little bit tiresome. Yep, a massive blowout on the backside, which I kind of expected. Yep, massive blowout on this side, which is fine. I'm just going to take a scraper to it. This is completely unimportant. Grab this knife here. Just to kind of round the hole out a little. The nice thing about MDF is you don't get splinters from it generally. If there's a way to get a splinter, I've gotten a splinter, but it's generally not something I get splinters from. Now, I'll set this back into place here. Pick it up. This vise does not clamp nicely on this end, which is kind of sucks for me, but it was poor design on my part. I should have done it a little bit better, but let's deburr this side. We're gonna take something else to deburr this with because there's a pretty big ass burr in here. I'd like to get this burr out. I know over time it'll go away, but I want it now. I'm just gonna half-ass chamfer that a little. I have see my scoring knife. Kind of works. All right, now. That sucks. My fit is not right. Fan-fucking-tastic. It's too tight. Why? Plug this in. I'm not upset about it being too tight. This is the first run, right? So. This is still in prototype stage, right? Are we recording? Yeah, okay. It's better if you plug it in. All right, now can we get it out? A punch-like item. Only makes sense I had to hammer it in, so why would I not have to hammer them out? Now, let's put our marble on it. That's perfect. The little tappity tap that I have to do to get this in and out of here isn't going to be a big deal, because this MDF will absolutely over time wear out or wear in. So tap it in, we're good to go. Grab the jig, turn it on. Oh, there we go. That one popped right out. There we go. We got jiggy with it. The next thing I'm going to do is just for my own, just for me. I'm going to trim this off a little bit to make it a little smaller. It doesn't need to be that big. And then the other thing we're going to do is we're going to test it in my other. Yeah, it fits good in my other vise too. It's a little wobbly over here, but that's to be expected. There's not as much support for it. It doesn't need a lot of support. It just needs to work. And it looks to me like we're working good. Let's grab another one just to check and make sure. Ooh. In there. So there is obviously I have a little inconsistency in my in these pieces, but that could even just be because of weather. I'm fairly sure once I start doing a ton of these, we'll be it just pops right out. They're nice and centered. I got a little burn on this one, but I didn't get a whole lot of burn. Though now with these things, all I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up some 50-50, if not